most of us are waiting for somebody else to come in, for somebody else to change it, for somebody else to step up, for somebody else to do the hard work. But what if you are capable of making change and of making something else happen?
The future of work is, to many, very scary, especially at this time. With the introduction of technology, with the merging of different generations, with so many resources available globally, interconnected at the switch and at a click of a finger of technology. What happens when you find yourself in the future of work and you feel like this is a toxic culture and you're struggling to figure out how to be the change that you wish to see in the future of work? That's what this episode will get in all about.
Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. And today we are going to dig into a little bit of some of my arena, which has to do with business, leadership, culture, and some of the zones that, like Bianca and I had promised in a recent episode that we talked about AI and mental health and kind of the overlaps of that we're going to be doing future episodes about. And so I'm super psyched today to get into some of the things that we as Evolvers are going to be riding the wave of, engaging within, and for lack of better words, impacted by, which is the future of work and what that looks like. And all of us listening, or I would say most of us, according to our stats, all of us have some way, some shape, some form of earning income. And the way in which we go about earning income will be dramatically impacted as a result of the exponential increase of the use and adoption of technology and different technologies like artificial intelligence. And with that, there is a huge opportunity as millennials, as we step into knowing that we are the biggest generation, we step into those leadership roles. And as we continue to try to figure out what is our best career or what is the future of our lives going to look like, how to change the way in which work has been done, how to bring change and evolution to the workplace, and how to do so when you might just so happen to step into or already be in a workplace that quite literally feels toxic. And I want to honor the voices that I hear in this episode, which is number one in the role of the employee or the staff member. And Bianca and I are going to share some of that, and how when we look at how we spend our time as a generation and as listeners, a lot of that time, if not over 80% over the lifetime, is at work, in our work efforts and endeavors, and also sharing the voices that we hear as we work with businesses and teams and leadership teams so that we can share both sides of the table, bring that together, and help us create meaningful, positive change that helps you as the listener step into that leadership role that with the advent and adoption and usage of technology that is here, help us really get in the frontier of creating a workplace that is not toxic, that no longer has some of the issues that have existed for generations in millennial continuing to be the issues that lead to really difficult challenges in life, including a lot of unnecessary stress, a lot of unnecessary mental health challenges, and a lot of this pervasive feeling of feeling alone and like your job, your work culture isn't a place where you can truly and wholeheartedly be yourself. So that's my intention for this episode. And by the time we are done with it, we have 20 minutes on the clock. My hope, my intention, at the deepest root of what we're going to be getting into is teaching us all how to understand how you don't have to be the boss to make some change. And you certainly don't have to be the boss to make change in the culture that you work in. And so I'll get us started, B, sharing this with you. Oh, you had something. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll get us started sharing with a really beautiful experience that I've had over the last 5 or so years working with teams, working with business owners, working with both the owners of organizations and the leadership teams. And as a result of that leadership team or organization aspiring to change their ways, aspiring to do work differently, aspiring to try to help their employees and their staffs be and feel psychologically safe to work at their workplace, which is awesome brownie points for those businesses we've worked with. And also in efforts to help the staff add more value as a result of kind of freeing up some of those resources of feeling like they're drained and whatnot. And so working on both ends of that spectrum, for lack of better words, we've heard a lot from those clients, right? Those clients that are the staff and those clients that are the business and representing the leadership teams. And B, what I've heard, and this is a summation of a lot of businesses that we've worked with over the last 5 years, and the pool of, if you will, workers or those employed, is that there are a lot of things that business owners know that they were never taught. So for example, one of the biggest conversations that we've helped organizations and business leaders really increase their capability zone in is in emotional intelligence. So you have traditional business organizations coming to Evolve and saying, hey, we need help. We don't know how to do this thing. We don't want to be the therapist to our team, but we want to have high performers and we want to help them evolve and grow. And we want to help utilize Evolve services to help try to bridge the different generations, because I, as a business leader at this age, right, I come from the boomer or the Gen X generation where we don't talk about goals and vision. And that's not something like existential conversations. What is the meaning of work? We didn't grow up caring about. And for us, it was you come in, you put in the 9 to 5 or you put in the hours, you don't complain, you get a paycheck, and then you go home to your families. And that's how we were raised. And that's what this leadership thing has meant for us. And so it's more of that, what we call manager mentality, right? More power and control type approach. And we have those business leaders coming to us at Evolve and saying, you know what? We recognize that it's not necessarily the best way of doing things. And so we need help to facilitate meaningful, positive, sustainable change, right? Especially if in the business context, we are going to remain competitive and adding value in the eyes of our consumers, our customers, our clients, et cetera, et cetera. So awesome. That's great. We love that intention. And now let's hear it from the staff. The staff are saying behind the scenes, our leadership team, the business that I work at, this business place is toxic, right? Typical millennial talk, right? This workplace is toxic. They don't have any emotional intelligence skills. There's just this power and control. There's this insane expectation that we come into work, leave our home at the door, when we know as millennials, given the science that we do have accessible at our fingertips, that we can't just leave our baggage at the door. That's impossible. And honestly, we've learned through the generations and being beaten up by the boomer and the Gen X generation that that's actually not healthy. And so we have the millennial workforce having this riff of like, I want to work here. I want to add value in these business organizations. And I really love the heart of these leaders that are in the boomer generation and the Gen X generation. And I see the heart on these people, but I'm struggling with working with them in this culture, in this workplace, because they don't realize it, but it has created a very unhealthy workplace dynamic. And so now picturing those two camps, what we've heard is there is a necessary give and take. There is a necessary evolution required on both the staff and that millennial generation. And whoever is the staff, it doesn't just have to be the millennial generation, and the leader, those who are quote unquote the leaders of the current workplace now. And so what I have learned as kind of being in that loving needle of trying to transcode and help them both evolve together in a way that is mutually beneficial, that creates a win-win-win, is making sure that number one, the people in the role of the staff and who will be eventually future leaders, but currently staff and employees, those who believe that the workplace is toxic, that this culture is no good, that, it's just this place that we don't want to be, those individuals really need to learn the skill sets to develop what we call leadership skills, emotional intelligence skills, culture building and change based skills, so that they can invite the leaders into a dialogue, a continuous dialogue that helps constructively and collaboratively create change for the future of workplace. So this is contingent upon one big element that I, as a result of this work that we've done, want to talk about. And I want you and I to dialogue around, which comes down to this one word: responsibility. Where do each ends of the table feel responsible and are actually responsible at creating, generating, and articulating through the roles, the processes, the culture, etc., that change that the business needs to remain sustainable, to become a better workplace, and to become a place that other people, future generations, want to work. And so I want to dialogue around that, because my standpoint, my belief in what I've seen to be successful is people that are in the seat of the employee is helping to learn what this whole topic is about, that you don't have to be a boss to make positive and meaningful change. I'm not saying that that is going to be easy. I'm not saying that it won't at times be really exhausting. And I'm not saying that at times, honestly, it's going to feel like no one wants the change that you want. But the meaningful change that you do aspire to see in workplace, it requires YOU within those dialogues. It requires you to have a degree of responsibility to show up and say, hey, I am a part of making change too. And I want to hear what the other side of the table has to say about this, right? Not a I'm right versus you're wrong. It is I hold a responsibility as an employee to bring meaningful change. But that's not 100% my entire responsibility. And same thing with the leaders. It is them checking in with their relationship of responsibility. Where do those lines stop at your responsibility as an employer, as a leader, as someone who can create meaningful, sustainable change in the future with the power, the control, and the influence and the capital, let's say, that you have, such that there can be a collaborative space to create a healthy, adaptive, a functional work culture.
How many people do you think are actually in the headspace of thinking about that, though? Because
very few. Very few.
Yeah. There's very few leaders who actually care about making a really wonderful culture for their employees, and people feel that and people sense it. And in our generation and the generation after us, so millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, there's this growing sense of my employer sincerely does not care about me, and it's obvious that they don't. I don't make enough money here to sustain myself. I'm being asked to do all of these things that are outside of my capacity, my mental, emotional, tangible capacity. And if ever there's feedback given, you're basically berated and told that you just need to put your head down and work and shut up.
Yeah.
So let's look at this from both angles, and we'll address it from both angles. From the employee angle, how are you supposed to feel safe enough to take responsibility in a culture where it is very toxic and there's this growing resentment for business? I can't tell you how many people now think business is evil, businesses are evil, capitalism and money is the root of all evil, and billionaires are going to blow up the world, because all business owners are now put in the same category as billionaires. And billionaires and owners and all of this are these evil humans who only care about money. So when that is the zeitgeist of the times, when that is the idea and the notion of the current state of the world, and people are burnt out and people are exhausted, how are they supposed to do this?
Yeah. It's such a great question, and it's one that I literally hear from one client who is a business owner. And I if I had a penny or a nickel or a dime, whatever, for the amount of times that he said, not necessarily to me, but just like in general, how do we do this? Like, how do I create meaningful change when X, Y, Y, Z, Z, all these dynamics are at play? And I'm exhausted just trying to make sure that the business cannot be that evil thing that everyone quote unquote thinks it is, but yet benefits but by the product and the services that the business actually provides in that community. Like, how do you do this? And I don't think that the answer is simple. And I think that that adds to the weight of, well, then how do you do it? Right? Because then we just go into this overwhelming state of like, I don't know if I can, I don't know what skills I have and I don't have, and go into this whole tailspin of what the hell am I doing? Where do I start? And how can I even think of this end in sight that is not going to ultimately get villainized and is going to be, here's the key, worth it, right? I have a business owner in mind, that's another one that's coming to mind, saying, oh, this whole time I didn't realize that all of this extra energy burned on trying to get my staffing excited about learning skills that will help them in the future. That's actually been an extreme cost to me because I'm not going and pouring into my own cup. I'm not self-caring, and I haven't been for the last 12 years, and that's why I'm burnt out. So it's an incredibly important question, and I'll bring it to something that I've had and found a tremendous amount of success with those business owners that are humble enough to take this for consideration. You're not supposed to show up and be perfect. You're not supposed to show up and not be burnt out. It's more so of a matter of recognizing what were the levers that contributed to the burnout in the first place. And I'll give an example with that client. It was them recognizing that they had to put all of the needs of the business before some very basic self-caring needs of personal hygiene, right? Of making sure that you're taking your dog for a walk when you are just sitting there hammering through meetings. Like, you're not a robot, right? And a lot of business owners right now are in the aftermath of trying to act as though they are, i.e., burning themselves out nonstop, such that they literally do not have the resources available to what you're saying to provide and take into consideration, hey, maybe this isn't the best workplace. Would I want to come to work for someone like me who is burnout, who's always on like their edgy seat, who is maybe not able to generate enough revenue for my employees to really feel like they can make a big living wage and or excited and eager to come to work, right? Like, I have so many generational boomers and Gen Xers that I work with that they know that there's this feeling that they should be creating a vision, values, actual meaningful workplace care, but yet don't even know where to start because they haven't even taken care of their basic needs.
To the original question though, for the
Mm-hmm.
employee, how are they supposed to take responsibility if that's the case? Because they can't
Yeah.
go to their employer and say, hey, go take a shower and go walk your dog and like go to therapy and get your emotional needs met. So like,
No,
let's make it really practical.
Yeah.
We'll do this for both sides.
Yeah.
For the employee, so for the team members,
Mm-hmm.
what can they do? What can they do and how can they start small? Because you and I both know there's very few emotionally intelligent leaders and business owners. So assuming that the leader and the business owner is emotionally unintelligent and emotionally unavailable, how and where can they start? What's a
Yep.
small, practical, tangible thing that they can do?
Yeah.
Evolve Ventures has a tremendous amount to offer. Not only do they have an ever-growing but still welcoming private Facebook society full of like-minded individuals, they also offer individual coaching. I myself have been coached by both Bianca and Emilia on separate occasions, and it's amazing to look back even a year ago in my life and see how far I've come. You almost don't notice that you're doing better for yourself over time. Not to mention, Out of the Mud, free live virtual event once a month. Can't think of a better way to spend a Wednesday night. You truly can encapsulate the value that it carries unless you've been there yourself and been part of the conversations and the connections that happen, and just access to that kind of information. The resources are just incredible.
So number one, I immediately go to resilience training, resilience skills. So for example, I have a client that's in the seat of the employee, and she's like, has every word you can imagine that says that this workplace is toxic, but yet is also still taking a paycheck, is also still getting all of the benefits covered, like has all of these benefits that are coming to her, and yet is very quick to go ahead and name everything that's wrong. So there are going to be many people that are in that seat, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, when you build the resilience skill sets, like when you go and try to do something great at your workplace, or you try to start to implement change, or you try to have a conversation with a staff member, or you try to improve something, and all of a sudden you get hammered with I don't appreciate what you're trying to do, or you didn't do it the right way. Why can't you just do it this way? Like whatever it is, you actually have the capability of kind of putting up like this emotional and energetic shield from being hammered by any what might seem constructive criticism or what might seem as shaming narratives that come in from your employer or your team or whatever. And when you build and develop a tolerance and resilience to the shit that's going to naturally run downstream in that organization, when you're trying to climb and make a better upstream, if you will, if you're not working on your resilience skills, and it can look like just in the moment, like not personalizing their inadequacies, that can go a freaking long way, because otherwise you're going to get burned out and you're going to feel like you're overextending yourself. So that comes down to setting boundaries. That comes down to recognizing when you might be overpouring at the expense of your own personal needs. And that breaks it down to, are you also making sure that your basic needs are met? Because if you're not, you're not going to have the resilience to be able to show up in a workplace, swimming upstream, trying to make meaningful change in the conversations with your coworkers and your colleagues. You're not going to have that layer, that protective shield of resiliency to navigate those social situations.
If an employee is fearful of losing their job, though, because they know that the people around them are very sensitive, and if they put up a boundary, they might get retaliation as a result of it, what are they supposed to do? If there is a sincere threat that if I piss my boss off, they're going to just fire me because they see me as replaceable, which again is the mindset of a lot of people. And this is what I hear literally every day from clients, which is why I'm asking you these questions.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do? Like, how do they set those boundaries when they're not certain it's not going to get them fired? How do they put up those emotional shields when it's not safe to do so?
What you're articulating is actually extremely common, and it puts all of us in this kind of like threat, fight or flight state. And so it's like, how the heck can I put up that shield when I already feel at risk of everything that I do, right? Cue the walking on eggshells. I tend to orient individuals recognizing that level of risk and risk aversion. I tend to try to peel away, like, what of that is just your fear, right? What of that is actual rational versus what of that is actually not. So more often than not, because maybe you have a boss that's not great, we tend to go just into the catastrophizing thoughts of, if I do speak up, I'm just going to get fired. When in reality, yes, that might be the case. And I would also challenge you to recognize that that might not be the case. And there is a probability that you might be running in that. So at the fairest level, Yeah, that's a risk. However, you don't need to increase the risk if it's unnecessarily done so. Does that make
If people
sense?
don't, it does. But if people don't have extremely high levels of self belief to do that,
It's fair.
probabilistic thinking. So if someone doesn't have that level of self belief to believe that I'm gonna be okay
Mm.
and I could find another job, God forbid, if something were to happen, would you still give the same recommendation? And how would you maybe make it a little bit more tangible?
Okay. So one of the things that that's actually rooted in is one's inability to feel like they can be a valuable asset in the marketplace. So if you all of a sudden are fearful of speaking up or doing something differently, and you're fearful of the retaliation of your leadership team or of your boss or whomever it is, obviously it's always important to recognize that there is a skill of having a plan B, right? Always learning how long term to develop skill sets that are going to make you valuable in the workplace. And I just had a person who was in this situation where my question to her was, what skill sets are you developing in the event that you do lose your job, so that we can actually go through that type of exercise? And that's why coaches are so helpful, because they help you think a little bit more strategically. Maybe when you might be underneath that pressure cooker of, I might lose my job. It's like, okay, and then what could happen? You go and look for a job, and then all of a sudden you look at your skill sets and see how marketable they are. So there's a lot of things that are possible to do, but plan B is always running in the back of my head. And I recognize that that's not something that is always running in people's back of their heads, because they're just focused on the now. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. However, I would invite and encourage all of us to consider that we all do need to have some degree of a plan B, because even if it's your current workplace right now, like I said at the very beginning, we are now, and I said this, I remember when I was in high school, or maybe it was college, to some family members, when they were like, why aren't you just relaxing on the weekend? Like, and I had said, you don't understand the future of work. I'm not just going to be competing as a human resource with Joe Schmo from XYZ city. I'm going to be competing with people that are globally across the world for a job to add value in a marketplace. And also, I'm going to be competing with robots and AI. And no one knew that at the time. But why I mention that is because there's that and increasing in this global marketplace. And so it's fair to have that fear of, well, what do I do? And I also think we can all turn our heads, or flip this coin on that with a growth mindset. If you're listening to this, you have some degree of a growth mindset, to see that as an opportunity for you to cultivate and develop skills, or at least consider the thought of what would plan B be in the case that your magnification goes into, I'm going to lose my job. Now, that's more long term. On the short term practicality, I would absolutely say learn how and develop the skill sets of conflict and conflict resolution, how to have conversations. We just had a out of the mud number 57 that went through the actual skill sets of how to have a difficult conversation, because of the fact that if you're always just living in fear of having a conversation with your workplace or your coworkers or whomever, and you don't learn the skill sets of actually having a conversation that will build those little micro fires or that micro influence to help create a healthy work environment, you're always going to be living in fear. And so you're never actually going to access that level of thinking to free up resources that allow you to think about plan B.
100%. To the people who are listening to this right now, who might be villainizing this conversation a little bit and saying, you guys don't get it. You don't understand how hard it is. You don't understand how bad it actually is at my job. You're just assuming I'm capable of this. You don't know my experience. You don't know what it's like for me. Believe me, I get it, because I used to be in the same exact spot. Before I met Emilia, if I were to have heard this conversation, I would have shut this off. And I would have said, they have no idea what it's like for me. I invite you to really take a moment and let those feelings come out, and then really ask yourself the question, is there any chance that what they're saying is true?
Mm.
Because the truth of the matter is, we do have a lot more capability and responsibility than we might feel ready to take on. And that's where a lot of these challenges come in. It's really easy to just point the finger at your boss and say they're a fucking asshole and they're never going to change. True, but what is that doing to you? And what skills is that allowing you to develop? None. You're basically just staying in this the world against me victim mindset, not actually figuring out, okay, what can I do? How can I show up? How can I do this? And if you can't at this job, that's okay. Then you can develop the skills of, what am I going to do? How can I make my life and my circumstances better? And I know that's hard when you're burnt out and you're exhausted and you're scared you can't pay rent and you don't have enough money in the bank to make a risky decision. We really do get it. And those constraints are the exact reason why you need to be doing this and why you need to help yourself feel capable of doing this, because the world is just going to get more and more difficult, and the workplaces are going to become more and more competitive with the way that the world is evolving. Like, this isn't going to get easier. But we collectively as human beings can try to show up better. We can build emotional intelligence. We can build resilience. We can build conflict resolution skills. We can learn effective leadership. There's so many free resources out there that can teach you how to do these things. And you don't have to be a victim to it.
And this, I'm really grateful for you saying that, B, because most people find themselves in the victim trap. And I've been there before.
Same.
And it sucks. And
Hardcore.
we got off just a second ago, office hours for group coaching, and I know that individuals that were in there, they were even sharing with us like their old version of their victim mindset. It came out in the way in which they were talking about their shame response and how when someone gave constructive feedback, they used to go in this like self-blaming spiral, and it led to unhelpful things. And the key word here is responsibility. What is within your control? There's always going to be things that are far more in your control than your current level of belief systems are going to tell you is in your control. And I keep thinking about, there's this one individual that I have in mind where the narrative that her parts want to tell her is that she doesn't have control. So that lets her off the hook of not going to free events that we host every single month. That lets her off the hook of not leaning in and listening to an episode like this and contemplating the question of, what can I do? What is within my control? How can I show up with a positive attitude, even though the circumstances themselves might not feel positive right now? And how can I shift my mindset about my own self-leadership and really take it upon myself? Because no one's coming to rescue me. No one's coming to save me. And we all have this like victim mindset that is so alluring because it's cognitively less expensive, right? There's less energy that we have to put into just playing the victim and pointing the finger elsewhere and not taking any control of our life. And yet that same person will have worse outcomes in their life than the person who shows up to free events, shows up for opportunities, shows up and listens to a podcast like this, and then takes it one step further for themselves to then contemplate this episode and say, hey, what one action can I do that will step me outside of that victim mentality, pointing the finger at my boss? What one thing can I do to recognize that I myself can lead myself, even though it might look messy, it might be challenging, it's gonna suck, there might be pain, I have to get outside of my comfort zone. What is one thing that I can do today that's going to shift my workplace tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and the future of people that I lead when I consistently show up as the leader within myself? And that's one of the things I invite everyone in this episode. Bianca and I have seen people go from literal homelessness to people who are crushing in their careers and who are world-class leaders. We have seen people who are on the brink of divorce and abusive, toxic relationships, and go from that to meaningful, impactful, fully loving relationships. We have seen people who have hated their workplace and who have pointed the finger everywhere but themselves take full accountability and step into this, what we're proposing today, which is you do not need to be the boss to change a culture, to change tomorrow, to change what it is that you have a problem with. It just takes one small step, one small action that is just beyond your comfort zone. And so if we've seen that and we have had that in our own experiences, you can too. You are not omitted from this opportunity, from this invitation, from life that allows you to show up outside of your victim mindset. So I will end there. There were some things that I was going to pull in on the different AI reports that Microsoft came out with, but I don't think that it's necessary at this point. And I think to that end, what I will say is, in closing, it takes a lot of courage. And I think that right now, more than ever in this time period of human civilization, getting real existential here, I think that courage will continuously be the one character trait that will actually help us in our workplaces, in our leadership, in our self-leadership, evolve to a better, brighter future for everyone. And that includes marginalized societies, that includes marginalized individuals, that includes people that don't even have internet right now. I think that all of us calling upon our courage and stepping in to be the brave one, that is the biggest invitation that you as an individual organism can step into. So I invite you into that. You're not alone on the train of courage and of stepping in to be the boss of your own life. And I'm looking forward to what not only our listeners have as the ripple effect of as a result of their contemplation on this episode. So please share with us what this episode was for you. And in closing, my episode suggestion, if you like this one, is 422. Are you living by someone else's standards? And that's a question we can all ask ourselves when it comes to the wake-up call that we might have, that hopefully this episode calls to, which is, oh my goodness, I actually do have more in control than my current belief system allows me to know.
Very well said. My episode suggestion is 419, the 4 different types of consent you need to know. If this resonated with you, or if this triggered the shit out of you, put a comment down below. Let us know what came up. And if this is something that you want more guidance on, please reach out. Emilia and I are both taking clients. If you feel like you missed out on group coaching, you can sign up for next year's group coaching. There's already been some people who have expressed interest in that, so you will not be the first. And we look forward to hearing from you. Bye, everybody.